Welcome back to the GenTwenty podcast. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Marina.
And today we're chatting with my friend and GenTwenty co-founder, Gina, who also runs the Bookstagram at Be More Books, about the books we read that changed our lives.
We're all big readers and have also been lifelong readers, so I'm pretty excited about this conversation today. For me, being an avid reader as a kid is what ultimately turned me into a writer now, and I'm still reading at least 50 books a year, trying to make it to 100, but have not quite hit that. But Gina, what is your background in reading like?
So, one of my earliest memories as a kid was grabbing a book from one of my several bookshelves every night before I went to bed. And I would wait for my mom or my dad to read to me. And I can't necessarily remember the book whatsoever, but I remember feeling genuinely excited to hear a story outside of my realm, outside of my world, the world that I lived in. And I've really carried that love and excitement for reading and for books with me throughout my life. Reading has always been such an escape for me. And it continued to be one through my teenage years, through my 20s, and now in my 30s. So, and I love it so much that I created a Bookstagram account last year to share what I'm reading and connect with other readers across the world. So, reading's a pretty huge part of my life.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. Like for me, reading was definitely an escape as like a child.
Mm-hmm.
Like I honestly have no idea where I got books from. I used to like make my mom stop at the library and I would check out the maximum amount of books at a time, which was probably like 10 or like 14, and then I would bring them back the next week. And we had a small library, so she would have to keep ordering books from like other libraries for me to read because I was just reading my way through the shelves. But I would like leave books around my house and just like sit down and start reading them. Like just all different kinds of books.
I love that. That was my childhood too. I read a ton and was like pretty introverted and shy as a kid, so I felt like they were a great escape for me. And I remember like when we were little, my mom wouldn't buy us toys, but if we were at a bookstore and asked for a book, she would always say yes to buying a book because it was like educational. And
Mm-hmm.
so I got out. I made out like a bandit every time. Every time we'd walk past the book section of a store, I'd be like, "Oh, can we just go look?" And then when we finally sold my childhood home a couple of years ago, we donated probably 300 books to the library that were just mine. Like, the memories, such good memories.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
the feeling of going into a library as a kid, and I mean, even maybe not so much now in a pandemic, but the feeling of even stepping inside one as an adult, it's like you're a kid in a candy store. At least that's how I've always felt.
Mm-hmm.
There, when I was working, when I wasn't working from home, and I would be in my office, we had a library down the street, and I would go there on my lunch break and just really check out every single new book that they had, every new release, every book that I had on my to be read list. And I'm like, do I need this? Yes, no. And
Yes.
I would leave with 5 or 6 books to add to the list. But it's just like that feeling. I've always loved that feeling of just being in a bookstore or being in a library. It's not even necessarily reading for me. It's just like the feeling of being around books, if that makes any sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's just like filled with possibilities and that like
Mhm.
comforting book smell too.
Yes, the book smell for sure, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, I haven't been to the library in a long time because it's not like super close to me. It's like a little bit out of the way. But when my son was taking swim lessons, his swim lessons were right next to the library, so we would go check out books in the library. So we were reading lots of kids' books. And I mean, I generally just buy the books I want, I guess. I don't know. But I feel like I also go through them quickly, so I like share with people. Like, I have a couple of friends here who they're just like, hey, I'm done with this. Do you want it? And then I'll send them pictures. I'm like, hey, I finished all these books. Like, do you guys want these? So I really like that, like passing around books that like you really liked or meant something to you, you know?
Yeah. I do have a few books on my shelf that I will never lend because they're just like so like the physical copies are so important to me. Like the first book I want to talk about today is this YA book that I first read in the 8th grade. It's called The Truth About Forever by Sarah Dessen. And I still read it once a year. I have the hardcover book, and one of my friends asked to borrow it from me a couple years ago, and I was just like, I'm so sorry, I cannot like borrow this book because
That
I've
book is
had
my
too many.
baby.
Yeah, well, I've just like had too many snafus with like, lending people books that they like dog ear the pages or drop them in the pool, and it's like at the end of the day, it's just a book. But this one is what made me want to be a writer because I like as I mentioned, as a kid, I was like pretty shy, and when I was in the eighth grade, like I think everyone remembers the early 2000 awkwardness of middle school, but I read this book and for the first time like saw myself in another character and just felt less alone, and it was just like life changing. So I can never lend that book, but always recommend it to people.
It makes a great gift.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Let me get you
Actually,
your
yeah.
own copy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, Nicole got me for Christmas this past year, Book of the Month subscription, which I
Such a good
love.
gift.
And yeah, I rejoined it recently, so I was pumped
Yeah.
about that. That was the best Christmas gift.
Well, I know what you'll be getting this year. Okay. Yeah, I've been a Book of the Month subscriber actually since, well, they sent me a cease and desist letter because GenTwenty used to have like their Book of the Month club, and it was like GenTwenty's Book of the Month, but they sent me like this really large envelope of cease and desist information. And I was like, wow, like it's okay, sorry, I guess. So I just changed it. And I'm not really active like with the book club anymore, but we call all of our like book posts like the G20 reads. Um, so I subscribed way back then because I was like, wow, if I'm getting this, like this must be something big and fancy. And for my birthday this year, I asked for like a full year subscription because it's like a really good deal. And I love when the books come out every month. Like I'm gonna start texting you, Gina, and asking you what you're getting every month because that's what I text my other Book of the Month Club subscriber friends.
Yes, you should since I just rejoined. So
Yeah.
we'll have to talk October picks. I'm anxiously awaiting for them to upload
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, it should be in the next few days. Very exciting.
I'm ready.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, when I didn't put this on my list, but like I don't know if you guys ever read The Boxcar Children when you were younger, but
Mm-mm.
it was like one of my favorite series. It was like these four siblings. I'm pretty sure they were orphans and they were supposed to go live with their grandfather, but instead they went and lived in a boxcar in the woods, like an old
Hmm.
train one.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like that they just, made this own little life of them like for themselves. And now like when I go to use bookstores, I'm trying to like recollect the whole series so I can read it to my children eventually. But that's like one of my favorite series from being a kid.
I love that.
Yeah, my cousin, when I was a kid, I really loved horses, and she had like all 30 Thoroughbred series books, and she gave them to me for Christmas one year, and I honestly think it was the best gift I've ever gotten. And I like devoured them, and I just found them in my garage recently and started rereading one of them. I was just like, oh my goodness. I felt like it was 2001 all over again.
Yeah. I love those like books that just take you back to like your childhood. Such like a fun feeling.
Yeah. Well, reading is such a integral part of your brain development as a kid. So if you're reading a lot, it's I mean, I don't know the science behind this, but it's like if you're reading a lot, it really sticks with you, and it's like molding how you move through the world. So
Mhm.
I know I think I have the vocabulary I have because I read so much as a kid and like learned so many words that um, I sometimes know how to pronounce. Apparently, I'll read a word in my head and then never say it out loud, and then years later,
Yeah.
sound a little silly, but
No, I do that all the time. Like I pronounce words wrong constantly, like all the time. And my husband is just like, "Have you like ever talked before? Like are you okay?" And I'm just like, "No one's ever said this word to me. I'm sorry." But I
yeah,
mean, here I am, 30 years old, but what can you do?
it's like when Harry Potter came out and we were all trying to figure out how to pronounce Hermione.
Yes.
Mhm.
No
Yes.
one said that correctly until we
No.
heard the audio version.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hermione.
I was gonna,
Hermione?
yeah, I called her Hermione for years until the movies came out. I'm like, oh.
Oh.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was like a collective O across America when everyone's like, "That's how you say it."
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Gina, so what are some books that have changed your life?
Okay, so I came to the table with two, and I narrowed it down from five.
Wow.
So because if I didn't, we would be talking probably for hours. So the first book that just really, you might laugh when you hear me say it, but the first book that I'm bringing to the table that really impacted me in some way, and I read it in my 20s, was The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I read it in 2012, so I was 21 going on 22. It was the first John Green book that I ever read, which for most people, that's Looking for Alaska, which I did read, but not until maybe a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I finally read that. I love that book as well, but The Fault in Our Stars holds such a place in my heart. It wrecked me emotionally. It still does when I think about it. And I'm really glad that I read it when I did. Like I said, I was 21 going on 22, and I was really glad I read it when I did, because I will be completely blunt. My early 20s sucked. I was on the cusp of graduating from college. I actually added an extra semester and took some time off in that time. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, what my career was going to be, what's my future going to look like. So my early 20s, they were filled with a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty about where my life was going. And I now know that I wasn't alone feeling that way. But back then, I mean, I felt completely lost, completely confused. And, I turned to friends, but I also turned to reading when I needed that escape. So let me get back to the book. So, how in the world did this young adult novel, romance novel, whatever you want to call it, inspire me to kind of get back in the midst of being a complete anxious mess in my 20s? So, first of all, John Green is amazing. His writing is beautiful. It's simple, but it's beautiful. My favorite line from the entire book that I know verbatim is, "You gave me a forever within the numbered days, and I'm grateful." How can you read that and not cry or feel something when reading something like that? The characters were so memorable. They're so charming. And one of the I will die on this hill. One of the many hills that I would die on is that Augustus Waters is one of the best young adult characters that John Green will ever write into existence. I will defend that until I die, hands down. One of my favorite characters in any YA book, any book that he's written. But really, this book, it had such an effect on me. It taught me about grief, about time, about cherishing every moment that we have while we're on this earth. Like I said, when I read this, life was not great. I was going through some really challenging situations through school, and through my family life, and everything that went wrong just fueled my anxiety and my frustrations further and further. And while I still grappled with an anxiety disorder through my 20s, and now that I'm 30, and I think about how this book really simply inspired me to live, how to take things one second, one moment at a time, how to simply be still in moments with yourself, how to be still in moments with friends, with your family, because you don't know how long you're going to have them. You don't know how long you're going to be on this earth. How to love other people and how to love yourself when you're going through grief, through sadness, through really troubling times. It taught me a lot, and it's I feel silly in a way saying this about a young adult book, but it it still has such an impact on how I view a lot of situations that I go through. Like I said, I deal with anxiety, and I still think about, a lot of the things that John Green wrote in the book. These characters are terminally ill cancer patients, who probably, I mean, they weren't real, but, you think about, what if I were to get cancer one day? And, it's just, I think when we're going through any kind of level of trauma or difficulty, it's really easy for us to kind of sit in it and just stay in our feelings. So I think this is one of those books that just reminds you that, yeah, feel what you need to feel, but try not to stay there, because life is so great and there's so many things to live for. And take those deep feelings and just ask yourself what you can learn from that and how you can grow from that. So, longest spiel ever, but this book, hands down, is probably one of my favorite books that I've ever read, and I'm so glad that I read it at such a pivotal point in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
And just a shameless plug out there for all YA books. My favorite author, Sarah Dessen, has often said that YA is for everyone. So
Yes.
it's not just for young adults, even though those are the target audience. It's for everyone because we all have emotions. And if we don't learn to navigate them when we are young adults, it's going to be even more complicated as adults. So I think that's why these novels still speak to us so deeply.
Yeah, for sure. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, I just turned 30 a few months ago and I still read YA. I will never shy away from reading those. I think they can teach young adults life lessons, but I still think if you're 30, 40, 50, they can teach you some kind of lesson that you didn't think about when you were 20 or when you were a teenager. So I'm give props to Sarah Dessen for saying
Sarah, if you're listening, please call me.
that.
Okay, moving on. Nicole, why don't you share with us one of your favorite books?
Yeah, so most of the books that I have picked for today are nonfiction books. I have also like a long list of fiction books, but I'm mostly focused on nonfiction. So the first one that I kind of like to read, or at least kind of skim through this every year, is "You Are a Badass at Making Money" by Jen Sincero. And I actually met her and she signed my book, so it's like really special to me. Like she said, "Here's to getting fabulously rich," and I said, "You're so right, Jen Sincero. Like, thank you so much." But I think that book just kind of like helped me move past the shame of making money and feeling like with money has to come a struggle and like you have to do so much to earn so much money. Like that's not true. And I think it's like we kind of have to like find this like money confidence and like this inner part of ourselves where we like become comfortable like negotiating for our worth and like understanding why it's like we need to make money to pay our bills. And it's also like not bad to want nice things for yourself. It's not bad to like want to save money for yourself and for the future. And I just feel like this book is so powerful in like really ingraining those reminders and lessons in you. And like she gives like mantras throughout the book, which I feel like are very powerful as well because they kind of like act as little reminders. Like when someone does is like really negotiating me down like from my rates, I'm like, no, like I can walk away from this. Like we don't have to continue to work together. And I feel like that's so powerful to know that I can walk away from something that doesn't work for me.
I love that. I have also read that and her original, just the yellow copy of it's like a yellow cover, very memorable visually. Just You Are a Badass, and I remember reading both of them and being very like floored after reading each because it just was the familiarity she has, but the like no nonsense advice was kind of like the kick in the pants I needed when I was making big life decisions and kind of doubting myself. And I was just like, "You're right, Jen. Uh, I'm gonna do this. It's gonna be great. Everything's gonna work out. Things are always working out for me." So
Yeah.
Yeah, I also read that. I haven't read You're a Badass at Making Money, but I loved the term that you used, money, having money confidence. It
Hmm.
it might get me to I might have to pick up that book. I just love
Yeah.
I love the power in that phrase. It's such a simple phrase, but having money confidence. It's
Yeah.
good.
It's like it's just really powerful to know that like when people are negotiating with you and things like that that you can walk away from that because it really like I don't like to feel resentful over things that I've worked on and that I've like taken, and it's like when someone is like really negotiating me down and being really nitpicky, like I have like my floor pricing and like I like cannot go any lower than that.
Yeah.
And oh sorry, I just hit my microphone. And it's like you have to understand that like I have business expenses, like I have personal expenses, like literally 30% out of everything I make goes immediately to taxes. And like if what I'm being paid not only to do the work that I'm doing, but to do like most contracts last like a year, the content has to be live. So that's like a year of expenses that I'm taking on, you know? So like all of these things have to be taken into consideration, but also like so do I.
yeah,
And like what I need to live my life also matters.
definitely. And another takeaway from that book for me was the concept that like money isn't finite, so like you'll always be able to make more money and there's enough money out there for everyone, that kind of concept. Because I think often women feel guilty for asking what they're worth because society has told us that we're not allowed to, or that we aren't worth what a man's worth. So that was just reinforcing like, oh yeah, I'm not going to feel guilty about asking for what I deserve and like what my time
Mhm.
and knowledge and experience is worth. So that was a huge, like I read it right before I started a new job, and that was hugely helpful in how I like priced myself and how I negotiated.
There is money to go around, like, no one needs to feel like, I don't it's just something I think about. It's like when, people are releasing different products or different, like, whether it's physical products or digital products, like, there are plenty of customers out there, like, there are plenty of people willing to buy things. Like, people are spending probably billions of dollars every day, and it's like, there's enough for all of us to be part of that. I don't know, and I feel like just reading that book, like, really kind of reframed the way that I think about money and, like, what I need to succeed financially and to make me feel confident, like, approaching financial conversations. So I highly recommend. I think it's worth the read, personally.
Yeah, my list, I'm on Goodreads, and my to be read list probably has like 1,000 titles on it, and it never gets smaller because for every book I read, I add at least 10 titles.
Mhm.
But it's
Yeah,
like weirdly comforting to me rather than stressing me out. I'm just like, oh, good, I'll never run out of things I want to read.
exactly, exactly.
It's
You
on
need exactly. I
the
feel that
one,
in my soul. I have
yeah,
yeah.
it's the one to-do list I don't want to hit zero on. So,
Yes. I love that.
That's fair. Hey, it's Nicole,
and Marina.
and we're popping in to say that we're launching a product. The Capsule Collab is our curated box with themed collections. Check us out at thecapsulecollab.com and on Instagram at thecapsulecollab.
One of my other favorite books, switching back to fiction, because most of my picks, I also, like you, Gina, could have come to the table with 100 books, but I narrowed it to three. One of my other favorite books I read when I was a junior in college and I was studying abroad and was also going through like a shitstorm of feelings and depression and anxiety and emotions. And I was living in France, which was great because I was a French major, so I studied abroad in France. And I stayed with a very sweet family. And I would, at night, I would read because they'd go to bed and then I would go to bed. And I had a little Kindle. And I had, I think it was a bootleg copy, but I had A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I might not be saying his name correctly, but it was, I read it in like 2 nights. And I remember as soon as I finished it, I immediately called my mom using my Blackberry, like
Mm.
9 hour difference. It was 2011, so the good old days. 9 hour difference. I don't think I woke her up, but I was sobbing and I was just like, Mom, I'm just calling to tell you how much I loved you. And she love you. And she was like, who died? I was like, no, I just read the most beautiful book I think I'll ever read. And it just ruined me. And so A Thousand Splendid Suns covers this tale of two women in a like very war-torn country, and there's so much strife and pain and anguish, but there's so much resilience and sacrifice. And it was just like, as from a writing standpoint, the language that he used to describe these horrific things was beautiful and haunting. And from a story point, it was just, you could see the mother character had so much love for her children. It just, I read it in a time when I was needing to read it, I guess, and it just hit me so hard. I've actually never read it again, but I did buy the hard copy to have on my shelf. But it's,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just, when people ask me, like, what's your favorite book? I always say that book because that was 10 years ago and I still think about it probably monthly.
Yeah, it's a really, really good book, and I mean his other books are too, like The Kite Runner and The Mountains Echoed. I think they're both
Hmm.
worth reading as well. But yeah, I also agree that A Thousand Splendid Suns is like on another level.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was one of those, and it's like now that I'm an aspiring writer trying to finish my first novel, I think about that where I'm just like, okay, if I could just be like 1/20th as good as that book, I'll be content with my writing.
He's just a beautiful writer. I read The Kite Runner in high school for it was for a summer reading, and
Mm.
I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I feel like was The Kite Runner his first book maybe?
I
Maybe?
think so.
I think
I
it
think it
was.
was because it was
Yeah.
definitely assigned for my summer reading. I'm a year
Yeah.
behind you in school.
Yeah, I just remember reading that and I was mesmerized. And I mean, I love reading, but some of the things that we were assigned to read in school, I definitely was not interested in. It was things that were outside of my comfort zone. But this one, it was so captivating, and I still think about that book every so often because it's just so beautifully written. It's so good. So everyone read The Kite Runner. Read anything by Khaled Hosseini. So good.
Mhm. Yeah, I just looked it up on GenTwenty, and we actually, Marina, you wrote about it in 2019.
Yeah, I'm obsessed. Okay.
Yeah.
Biggest
I won't
fan.
hide it. But I think
That's
it's funny
funny.
that I've only read it once, because normally when I read a book I love, I'll read it over and over again. But that book is like so sacred to me
Yeah.
that I don't even want to touch the memory. But
That's interesting
but I
because,
bought a physical copy of it.
yeah, I am not a rereader. I, like, do not go back and reread things.
I do it all the time. It's like a comfort almost. I read somewhere that people with anxiety tend to rewatch shows and movies and books and reread books
Yeah.
because it's like a sense of familiarity, like you know what's going to happen, and it's like gives you, it's like a touchstone to ground yourself. Because
Mhm.
I've always been someone who reconsumes content, but I think um, certain things I just are like so perfect. I don't want to spoil it by
Mhm.
revisiting.
Like the memory of it.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's one of the books I still have on my shelf. I don't keep a ton of books anymore. I used to keep like shelves and shelves and shelves of books. But I feel like as I've gotten older, I've kind of just I have like my little stack of books that I'm like these are my favorite books, and there are only 2 books that have ever made me cry that I've ever read. And so they're like very special to me.
And guys,
And
Nicole is not a
She's
crier.
not a
no.
crier at all.
No. I just don't really cry that often.
I don't know that
Um
I've in the almost 10 years I've known you, I don't know that I've ever seen you cry.
I feel like there's one time where we were laughing so hard over something I
Oh,
started
maybe
crying.
that.
That might be
Maybe
I don't know
that.
if that counts. That's
I
like,
don't know. Like sometimes if I'm laughing like really hard, it's like emotion just like pours out of me and I just can't stop it all. I know that's happened to me several times in my 20s, but yeah, I don't really cry. So when books make me cry, it's they're very special to me. And like one of them is Where the Red Fern Grows. I read
mm,
that like in middle school and I was just so devastated over it. It also made my husband cry, who was also not a crier in middle school. He cried over this book as well. So, yeah, that's a book we keep on our shelves.
aw.
Even though I don't have the confidence to reread it now.
I don't think I've ever read that. I'm gonna add that to my list.
Yeah, I've never read it
Well,
either.
just prepare yourself because it made me cry, who is not a crier, so that should tell you something. Devastating.
So the next book that I added to my list, well, out of my 2, was Becoming by Michelle Obama.
Hmm.
A very long book, 400 plus pages, which I read a lot of books that are longer than that, but for some people, that's a lot of pages. It's a lot, and
Mhm.
the font is very tiny.
Especially with nonfiction, it's long.
It's
Mhm.
long, yes, very long, but fantastic book. I wish I had this book in my early to mid 20s, but I'm thankful that I had it in my late 20s. So I read this when it came out. I was 28 at the time, going on 29. So whatever, but this memoir is a real deal when it comes to all sorts of advice, life advice, career advice, encouragement, discrimination, dealing with grief, women empowerment. I mean, you name it, she covers it. It's
Mhm.
it's a very, it seems at the front of it, it seems like it's just going to be okay. This is going to review her childhood and her life pre White House, but it's so much more than just like that simple timeline memoir that a lot of people write. She's so raw in this book. She's so honest, open, intimate in all the stories that she shares, and I'm happy to have read it when I did. But I will say, having this book to guide me through choosing my career path through post college, as well as, just having those feelings of self doubt and questioning my worth in my mid 20s, I think that would have been such powerful knowledge to have at the time. So to me, this book has had such an impact on me as I go into my 30s. So I'm thankful for that, but definitely wish I had it earlier in my life because the book, it's a story of love, redemption, and it just emits that message of that it's okay for you to not have everything figured out for your life. I think we're constantly evolving in this life, and I would argue that we're evolving in more ways than one in our 20s. And sometimes I wish I had someone to tell me that it's okay to take a moment to breathe and not have every single detail of my life planned out right after college, because some of my classmates did or some of my friends did. So this book is the real deal, the absolute real deal. Like I said, it's a commitment. It's 400 plus pages. The font is super tiny, but it's so good. It's so good. So, so good.
Mhm.
Gina, I completely agree. I listened to it actually from, I think I got it from Libby, like the library app, and I borrowed the audiobook because I just love Michelle Obama's voice and wanted her to like
So
talk to me.
soothing.
I had that same response where I thought it was just going to be kind of a walkthrough of her life, and I got so much out of it, especially the career stuff. I read it this past 400 days ago. I read it in January, which was January 2020, which was actually 10 years ago. But I remember I was listening to it while I was doing a career coaching session or a career program where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, and I was feeling so defeated because I'm 29 and I just felt like I shouldn't be figuring out my career still. And listening to Michelle Obama's career path and how many changes she made and how many risks she took and how things didn't look like how she planned, it was so empowering because I was like, all right, if Michelle Obama had to had these same feelings when she was in her 20s and 30s, like I know I'm going to be okay. And I just remember being really really moved by it too.
Yeah, I regret not listening to the audiobook. I actually said to a friend recently where I was talking about some of the books that I plan to talk about today. And I said that, this was on my list. And I said, I think whenever my husband and I decide to have kids, I'm going to play Michelle Obama's Becoming on audiobook for my future child so that he or she can hear the strength and the soothing nature in her voice. Um, yeah, it's so good. I mean, there's just so much power in hearing another person write about life and how it can be as easy as, joining in community with others. It can be as simple as embracing each other's differences and hearing about each other's life journeys. It can be as simple as, asking someone, how are you? And really allowing them to unload on you versus kind of giving that acceptable societal response of, I'm good, truly, you know, there's so many life lessons in this book, and everyone at any age should read it, but most certainly if you're in your 20s and you need some good career advice, this book is, like I said, it's a commitment, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, I have not read this book actually, but I just added it to my Amazon wish list. And I have Audible credits, so maybe I will use those to listen to it. And Audible, if you're listening, we would love for you to sponsor us because we love audiobooks.
We really do.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like from what you guys are saying that I really need to read it, and everyone should read it. But it is a book that it's kind of been on my list for a while, but I feel like I just hear people rave about it, but like not really why. So hearing you both go like more into depth about that makes me feel more like I want to take on the commitment.
Definitely.
I'm ready for it.
I know I think with nonfiction books, it can be a big commitment. Not everyone likes to read nonfiction because it can be it can be harder to escape reality if you're reading about something that actually happened. But, and I mean, I know I listened to it, I didn't physically read it, but it was just like I would just wander around my apartment listening to her dulcet tones and feeling like everything was going to be okay. So I definitely recommend consuming it in any form that works for you.
Good to know. Maybe I'll start it this afternoon. Maybe my son will like to listen to it with me
I bet he
as
would.
he terrorizes our house. Love him so much. Oh my
Nicole,
goodness.
what's another title on your list that you want to talk about?
So I have two more that I wanted to briefly touch on. So one of them is Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin. And she wrote The Happiness Project as well, which I know is a really popular book. I think I read that in college actually. But Better Than Before is all about habits and like changing your habits. And there are two strategies she talks about that I feel like have really helped me be able to change my habits. And the two strategies are essentially called like piggybacking, which is attaching a new habit onto a habit you already have. So maybe that's like, oh, you're brushing your teeth, but you're trying to get more exercise in. So you're doing squats while you brush your teeth. And it's just like coupling those two habits together. And then I believe the second one is called piggybacking. I might be wrong about this. But essentially, it's like when there's a change in your schedule and you're trying to start a new habit, it's like starting the habit with the change. So maybe your work schedule's changing, but you're trying to eat better. So you're going to just, on your first day of work or your first day of school, you're going to start taking salads with you, okay? Like there's no next week. Like you change everything all at once. And I feel like I used to feel like, oh, it's like we need to like slowly pace ourselves into this or we're going to fail, but that's actually like not true. Like changing everything together helps you stick better with both habits, which I always thought was really interesting. So, those are just two little strategies I use to get more stuff done in my life, and I feel like they're both really helpful. And then the last book that I wanted to talk about is called The Happiness of Pursuit. And it's kind of like how, people are always like, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And this book is like a whole bunch of interviews about people who are pursuing all different things, like whether it's like climbing the seven summits or road tripping across the US and stopping at like all different places or collecting certain stamps or like taking pictures of birds and stuff like that. Instead of it just being about like, achieving something, it's about people who are actually finding joy and success and power in the journey of what they're pursuing. So it's really like finding happiness in the pursuit of something. And I just personally find that so fascinating that people are just so passionate about things, whether they're like these really big, literal mountains to climb, or just very mundane things they kind of do in their like spare time. And it's like, yeah, my hobby is bird watching, and I'm trying to collect 100 different pictures of birds. Like, it's just so fun to me to like read about this and like really like people to be invested in things other than like what we think of as like normal or what we should be doing. Like, I think it's really cool when people have different hobbies and interests. So that is one book that I think about a lot. And especially when I try to like encourage other people to explore their interests and things like that. So that's one book I just really recommend reading if you're interested in like pursuing alternative paths.
I'm adding that one to my 1,000 book to be read list as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
added both of them. And I think it's interesting because like with the whole like hustle culture and the drive we put on ourselves, it can be really hard to remember to enjoy the process and enjoy the moment of something
Mhm.
you're doing. Like, how many times have we talked about how hobbies we're working on have then somehow become side hustles that we try to profit it's or make profitable? And so
Mhm.
I'm intrigued by that because I have the same problem of not being able to just sit and enjoy like the pursuit. And so I'm
Mhm.
excited to
Yeah.
check that out.
Yeah, it's like doing things just for like the pure joy of it, and I don't think that's like something most of us do enough of. Like it's like, oh, we're always trying to make money off of something or like,
Yeah, it's always to
you
cross
know.
something off your list or check a box or like achieve
Mhm.
something.
Yeah. So if you're always feeling like you have to, do something with everything in your life or need to achieve X, Y, and Z, I just really recommend reading that book. It's kind of like a slower pace sort of thing, and it's just different stories of different people. And I don't know, I just really, really love it.
Yeah, I love that. That's something I mentioned Goodreads earlier. I am obsessed with Goodreads. I've been on it since like 2008. And they do this thing where you can set a reading goal and you can like log it in and it tells you like what percent of your goal you've hit throughout the year. And I started tracking my reading goals when I was 25. And so I read 25 books when I was 25. And then I read 50 books when I was 26. And then I read 75 when I was 28. And then for 29, I was going to read 100. And I just couldn't get there. Like, it's hard, right? It's hard to read 100 books. And I had like 500-page books that people were gifting me. And I was just like, I can't start these. And I was getting really stressed out because I just wanted to hit this number goal rather than enjoying reading, which is my favorite thing in the whole world. So I had to just do away with the goal setting for books. And I will just try to, I tell myself I'll read 12 a year. That's a book a month. And like, obviously, with my reading pace, I read more than that, but I had to take the pressure off because like we can't, like reading is not meant to be just like achieving and crossing check marks off, right?
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
like not what we get out of it.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about that too because I always set a reading goal, and I think it was last year that I read 100 books in the year. But I mean, that's also including children's books and just putting
Mm-hmm.
that out there. But hello, they're still books. I still read them. Okay, they have an ISBN. They count. So
You can buy them on Amazon and resell them, so they're definitely real books.
yeah, exactly. So um, yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of like quality over quantity of books because I feel like, especially as readers, I feel like it tend to be like, oh, have you read this? Have you read that? Like, and it's like, my goodness, slow down. Like, I don't, do I need to have read 25 books this month? Like, I don't know. So it's really, I feel like kind of this like struggle of people who really like to read, where it's like how we're talking about these like very long lists of books, and like we're never going to read all of those books probably in our lifetime. So I think it's really about focusing on the books that sound most interesting to us, whether those are fiction or nonfiction or like are really speaking to us and things we really want to read. Because I feel like sometimes there are books that are like bestsellers and I'm just like, it was okay. Like, I don't know. And there are books that, might not be rated super highly or sold super well. And I'm like, this book is so powerful. It has changed my life. So I feel like, yeah, just looking at what's out there, and I mean, of course, listening to like your friends' recommendations, like people who are similar to you, like you might also enjoy what they read, but yeah, like really considering how you invest your time in the books that you're reading, I think is like a better goal to have than setting like a number goal.
Especially in 2020. I think I changed my Goodreads goal from 50 books down to 30 because 2020. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's totally okay. And I imagine there's probably a lot of people in this day and age that also did that because life can get crazy. And I know just from being on Instagram in the book community, I see all of these people reading tons and tons of books per month. And meanwhile, I'm struggling on one. And they're
Hmm.
on book number 10, and it's August 12th, and there's still 20 some days left in the month. And you kind of go into a mode of, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I read as fast? But it really does go back to that quality over quantity thing, and that it's okay that maybe you only finish one book a month. Maybe you only finish
Hmm.
one every other month. What matters most is that it meant something to you. You chose it for a reason. Or maybe it didn't mean something to you after reading it and you wanted to throw the book at the wall. But it's that quality aspect that I think a lot of people forget, especially in that Bookstagram community. I think it's going after that quantity and it's going
Hmm.
after those bestseller books. But I just can't operate that way ever. I don't think
Yeah.
I'd rather read less books than what I've set for myself in a year than to read 50 books that I kind of liked. I'd rather read
Hmm.
10 that really had an impact on me.
Yeah. And for any of you who are like very goal oriented out there, it's also an important reminder that if you don't like a book, you should stop reading it.
Yes.
My friend told me that I used to have this rule that I made myself, and if I start a book, I have to finish it. And for the longest time, the only book I had never finished was Little Women because I read it when I was in the 5th grade and I hated it so much. It made me so angry. It's still like one of the only books I've never finished. But my friend, my smarty pants friend, was also in the 5th grade with me, and she was like, life's too short to read books you don't like. And I was like, you're right. And I stopped reading it.
Wow.
And but I think about that all the time, and it's kind of like a good, better message for how you choose to spend your time. Like you like what you're saying, it's the quality, not the quantity. And if you pick something up and you aren't ready to be reading it, it's okay to put it down. You can come back to it or you can read it later. There's a book I've been quote unquote reading for like 3 years, and I'm sure I will finish it, but I just haven't been in the right space for it. So I just put it to the side and I'll revisit it later, and I'm working on other books that are going to be more fun and more pleasurable to read in the meantime.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah, I really need to hear that because I currently am reading a book right now that I just don't know how I'm gonna finish. And I don't like leaving books unread. I feel like for me it's a way I discipline myself to also read things that I don't love. So it's really hard for me to not finish things that I start. But yeah, I'm reading A Book of Longings right now, and it's not my vibe. So I don't know if I can do it, you guys.
And you know what? I
I don't
think
know.
as long as you give it, what is it, the old college try, there a couple of my guy friends have recommended books to me that are just like not my genre, not my style, and I like they're mostly sci-fi, which is just not my vibe. But I found myself, the last one I read, I found myself really enjoying it, and I like gave it 50 pages because it was like 400 pages. So I was like, all right, if I read 50 pages and I still hate it, I'll stop. But by the 50th page, I was like, actually, I'm kind of into it, and I learned something about myself. But if I had hated it, I would have just been like, thank you, I tried it, it wasn't for me, and that's okay. So books are not meant to be punishment. Don't punish yourself.
I love that so much.
That's fair.
That's so good.
This has been another episode of the GenTwenty podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a rating and a review if you're feeling so inclined. And let us know your favorite books. DM us on Instagram at GenTwenty. Bye!